fundamentally, I think that is in our DNA, that we love the lights and the sound. We love the imagery. We love storytelling. And that really kind of separates us as that technical / artistic realm of folks. AV versus IT.
Welcome to Software Defined Survival. My name is Patrick Murray, and today's guest has been the CEO of Starin Marketing for 27 years. So I'm really looking forward to learning as much as I can from all that experience from Bill Mullin. Bill, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Good morning, Patrick, or whatever time somebody is listening to this. I am glad to be here. I wasn't the CEO for 27 years, by the way. I never imagined myself as a CEO. I took a course of everything from sales engineer, and then coming into this as kind of a sales representative, and then into the marketing side, VP sales and marketing. And from that, graduated to president and then CEO. And it's been really an enlightening trip in terms of fundamentally learning how an organization applies its resources to what matters most. And what matters most, ultimately, is what is the industry calling for? What opportunities and or missing links are there within the industry or our offer as an industry? And then supporting our channel partners as to how they can reach a greater service or a ability to make things easier for the customer, make things more readily available, all those sort of things.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for clearing that up. So tacking onto that a little bit more, what is your origin story in AV? How did you wind up in this business?
Well, the quick story is I grew up in Philadelphia, and I had great influences from my parents taking me to musicals that might be playing Philly before headed to Broadway. I was immersed in a city that was very musical, from the street corner doo-wop singing you might have recalled seeing in the movie Rocky, onto the Philly sound, a soul sound that was rich in the city at the time. And from that, I also had my father, who was an engineer, and my uncle, who also was an engineer. My father for Philco, an appliance company, and likewise, my uncle was with RCA. He went on to be chief engineer for the TV division. My father went on to be chief engineer of the air conditioning and refrigeration division, which was absorbed by Ford. That meant I had a science and a technology influence from those men who were coming back from war and trying to build America. And so that was an interesting mix that led me to the British invasion. And on the little transistor radio I built from a Heath kit, listening to, the Dave Clark 5 drum set boom out of that little transistor radio and going, oh man, I want to play. So that started my music career as you would imagine, in the garage band level on through to playing soul songs and blues and psychedelic and ultimately kind of a southern funk thing, roots thing. And
what instrument?
Drumming all during that time.
Okay.
It wasn't until later when I really crossed over into the recording world. I wanted to go study recording, and there was only one school at that particular time, Miami. So I went to Ball State University in Indiana, and they only had, of course, the music school, and they had radio TV. And I thought, well, okay, I can get to know production, and I can get to know what media tools are like. So I got to know cameras, and of course got to know all aspects of audio from that. The music school had a recording department. So ended up with a major in radio and television, telecommunications now called, and a minor in speech and music. So I was busy playing rock and roll weekends, going fraternity parties, college clubs across the Midwest. And so I really became fascinated with the recording side of the business. Of course, when the Beatles brought out Sgt. Pepper, everybody went, wow, okay, the studio becomes an instrument itself. And so I really wanted to get into the recording world, and my band did well enough to ultimately get a contract with United Artists. That put us in the studio, and that got me to see the actual process. That's where I wanted to go. After my band broke up, got a job at a radio and TV station in South Bend, Indiana. And out of that, got to know some guys at the station. We started doing our own independent production. We had the opportunity to pick up a contract for the convention center that was being built in South Bend, and maintained the AV for that. So we ended up having this nice little diverse company in a mid-sized market. And hence we built a studio. And out of that, we were building, of course, everything from church sound systems to nightclubs. And disco was big at that time. So I went from being a drummer to being a DJ. And ultimately, that company I turned over to my partner. I went on to Chicago. I got into the DJ scene at that point. There was something called house music was emerging out of that scene, where these guys, were taking over warehouses, and hence the term house music. And wow, it was really an explosive scene. And at the same time, I'm helping guys who were building. A lot of jingle producers at that time were leaving the core studios of Chicago recording or Universal Studios, and building their own places. So I've helped them do that. So right around there is where a guy named Jim Starrin came to know me. And he saw my influence, basically, and wanted me to start repping. And I said, is it a regular paycheck? And he said, yeah. So that started my manufacturing connection.
Yeah. So it was that steady paycheck, that reliability, that was the draw, it sounds like.
Yeah. You interviewed Paul Konakowski a while back, and we'd worked together, and he knows my sons really well. My first son studied the same route. He's a big EDM guy, and he went to a school out here called Expression for music technology. And Paul said, "Oh, he's an AV guy. He just hasn't realized it yet." So I'll never forget that expression. And sure enough, he's an AV guy now.
That's funny. So I could ask you about what some of the differences are in AV now as to then, but maybe it might be more interesting to talk about what's been constant over the